Hey there, and welcome to Change Your Mind. In this episode, I'm going to share with you some of the intimate details of my own personal struggles with anxiety and depression, and how a few hours with a gifted homeopath helped raise me up in my being and change the entire trajectory of my life for the better. My name is Michael, and for more than 15 years, I struggled with chronic anxiety and depression that wreaked complete havoc in my life. It often left me feeling completely exhausted, helpless, confused, and alone. Since that period many years ago, I've since found a way out of the darkness, and I'm now living my best life as a YouTube creator and the owner and operator of an online business that's dedicated to helping people like you find solutions to anxiety and depression. From my own battle with anxiety, I'm very familiar with the feelings of agitation, overwhelm, confusion, uncertainty, worry, and that overarching sense that there's this invisible barrier that's holding you back in life. From my recent browsing on Reddit and other online forums, I find it increasingly alarming just how many young people are resorting to the use of synthetic chemicals and pharmaceuticals in order to find solutions and relief from the symptoms of anxiety. My message is for any of you out there between the ages of 20 and 40 that are experiencing symptoms of anxiety and depression. What I'm going to suggest to you here is that there's better alternatives. There's holistic approaches that are outside of the normal of what we consider to be rational approaches, and that these other alternatives, healing modalities, can potentially help you find true solutions and true healing to the root causes of your anxiety. The purpose of sharing this with you is that you can start thinking about some alternative approaches and rarely discussed ideas that are holistic, that can potentially help you find a solution to the challenges that you're facing with your anxiety and depression. Don't get me wrong, I'm not passing judgment. Sure, medical professionals and medications, they have their place. In some extreme cases, it's warranted. However, I firmly believe that there are better options out there, holistic approaches that can actually address the root causes of anxiety and depression. And instead of just the BS, the Band-Aid solutions that the current model is suggesting is the way out. In most cases, I'm guessing that you arrive at your anxious state without the use of medications and pharmaceuticals. And so that what I'm suggesting here is that the least complicated and most concise path to true healing can also be found without those substances. The truth of the matter is that something that's often failed to be mentioned is that pills and medications can actually complicate the process and actually prolong finding the resolution and the true source and the ability to rise above the underlying condition. To give you a little snippet of my backstory, I was involved in a series of very challenging and traumatic life events between 2004 and 2006. And this cascade of events kind of started first with a very emotional breakup with my partner of 3 years that kind of came all of a sudden, and it was very hard on me emotionally. And then a few months later, I was on a boat that ran aground and sank, and it was a really good friend of mine. It was his research platform, and so a lot of his professional life and his personal life were caught up in this. And again, it was a very trying experience. And about a month after that, I was working in Southeast Alaska as a biologist aboard a fishing vessel when at 5 o'clock in the morning, a crew member literally dropped dead in front of me. Then a few months later, in the process of applying to medical school, I was volunteering at a hospital, and my job was basically to comfort the ill, the sick, and the dying, those people that were from out of town that needed some kind of, like some attention and love, just to so they wouldn't feel quite alone and on their own. And I guess probably the final straw was a lonely conversation that I had with a comatose girl of about 14 or 15 years old that was in the burn unit at the hospital. And she had third-degree burns over 70 or 80% of her body. Anyways, that event was kind of like the final straw, more or less, in my mind. Fast forward, I don't know, 6 months, 8 months later, in early of 2006, I'm coming back from a road trip from Mexico, and I just have this weird energy moving through me that basically kind of results in a nervous breakdown. A couple months later, in July of 2006, all of a sudden, my life just starts disintegrating. It goes from a place where I'm feeling very high and very confident to a place of very low where I'm very confused. And it all kind of started with an event. I was in downtown Vancouver. I was at a department store. I was buying CDs or shopping, doing something. And all of a sudden, I started to feel really off. And I started getting a pain in my chest in the left-hand side, and I started having difficulty breathing. And so I just didn't know what to do. So I laid down on the floor, and eventually someone in the store came by to ask me what I was doing. And I told them I didn't know what was going on. I didn't feel well, and I felt that I was like, something was wrong with my body. And so they called an ambulance, and I was whisked away to a hospital in the back of an ambulance. And yeah, when I got to the emergency room, they admitted me quite quickly. The emergency room doctor did a bunch of, the usual physical examination, checking all my vital signs. She hooked me up to an ECG and kept me there for observation for about 3 to 4 hours. And at the end of it, she just looked at me and she said, "Michael, there's absolutely nothing physically wrong with you." And she released me to go home. And this probably was the beginning of the most confusing period of my life. Now, what I found out afterwards is what had happened is that I had had a panic attack, and that severe stress and anxiety that was operating within me on a subconscious level was starting to manifest and express itself in my body, in bodily sensations. And at this point, I'm 30 years old, and I have never had any issues with anxiety or depression or this concept of stress. I've always been pretty energetic and pretty optimistic and pretty light. And so I'm really confused as to what's going on. And at one point in all of this, I'm sitting across from a doctor who's very calm, and she's explaining to me that basically that I'm exhibiting signs of stress and symptoms of anxiety, and that I should do 2 things. One of them being I should start meditating. And the other thing, she recommends that I go and join a group clinic that focuses on dealing with symptoms of anxiety and how to mitigate it. And, at the same time, you need to understand, I'm sitting there listening to this doctor, and, I'm having this out of mind and out of body experience. And I'm just thinking to myself, are you fucking serious? You're telling me to sit down and, close my eyes and stare at the wall, do nothing. Meanwhile, I'm having this freaking meltdown. I don't know what's going on. And you're basically telling me I need to step back and do nothing. Are you fucking serious? At this point, I feel like everybody's mocking me, and I feel like I've been dropped into this new reality where not a single thing makes sense, and that everything's turned upside down, and that I actually am losing all sense of who I am and what I'm doing. And it was incredibly confusing. Again, the most confusing period of my life. But what eventually happened is I started doing some of these things. I started making little changes. After many, many talks and many consultations with psychologists, doctors, dentists, and other healing practitioners, I started making subtle changes in my life. And a lot of this kind of came with the realization that how I was living, something with how I was living and experiencing the world had to change. And at one point in all of this, during this period, I remember reading this book. This book that's written by Emmy Lowe called Emotional Emotional sensitivity and intensity. How to manage your emotions as a highly sensitive person. I remember reading this book, and it's like this light bulb went off in my mind. It's like, wow, all of a sudden, a bunch of things in my life that kind of like had confused me and thrown me for a loop, all of a sudden started making sense. This book had such an impact on me. I remember being struck so deeply in my being that I broke down crying, and yeah, like this all these emotions and this new awareness kind of dawned on me. And after reading that book, like, it really changed my mind, and I started looking in different directions for answers to the challenges that I'd been experiencing. I started looking at other modes of understanding both myself and the concept of what it means to be human and to live in a human body and have this human experience on Earth. And yeah, I really started looking in different directions. And a great example of that is how I, started looking at things I was in my realm of experience, how to look at them differently. And a really prime example is this seasonal allergy problem that I had been dealing with for about 20 years. Basically, every spring would come and I would be miserable. And as soon as spring was coming, I would just be like, I would want to hide because this allergy to pollen that I had was so strong that it basically completely overwhelmed me and almost made it to the point that I couldn't function properly. And I kind of got into the point in 2016 where I'd hit this wall, where I made the realization that the drugs, the over-the-counter remedies I was taking, were actually making me worse. And what I started realizing is I started looking into things, and one of the remedies I was taking, one of these medications, it contains pseudoephedrine. And if you don't know, pseudoephedrine is in the family of amphetamines, which basically acts like speed, and it really jacks your system up. For me personally, what it did is it actually really caused agitation within me. It gave me pretty big nosebleeds and also really prevented me from sleeping at night. And so, although for the long time I thought like the pills were actually helping to ease the symptoms of the allergy, it was creating a whole bunch of other complications down the line and actually stressing my system. So I made this realization that I started to realize that I'm a pretty sensitive person and I need to find a different avenue to deal with this allergy problem. And so on a bit of a whim, in 2016, I decided to make an appointment to see a homeopath just to try a different angle of approach to see if I could find a more natural solution to my allergy problem. And at the time, I didn't really know too much about homeopathy, other than that it kind of treated the human organism, the human system, as a complete energetic system. And so it encompassed it and considered not just the body, the physical element, but also the heart, mind, and spirit. So the body, the emotions, the intellect, and belief systems, and had this more holistic approach to healing. I also knew that the remedies used in homeopathy were based largely on plants and other naturally occurring substances, and that the idea was to use the energies inherent in these substances to alter the energetic profile of the subject or the patient. My initial visit with the homeopath, who was a lady named Kim, it was scheduled for 2.5 hours. Never before had I been to an appointment that was scheduled for so long, and I didn't know what to expect. But it really turned out to be a very, very, very special encounter. The 2.5 hours literally flew by. What I had kind of expected to be a long and drawn-out conversation turned out to be this beautiful experience where never before had I felt so well listened to and understood by another human being. Kim asked me questions about myself, my life, and my perspective that I had never really even entertained myself before. She asked me a series of questions that probed in different directions and kind of led me down this trail back in my mind through my experiences. And the further we went, certain answers led her to different questions, and we went, like I say, deeper and deeper down to within my consciousness and my being and my overall experience of life. And at the end of this experience, at the end of this exchange, I left with this feeling of lightness that I can't really even describe, that just this, like a burden had somehow been lifted off of me. And again, this was a new experience for me after dealing with multiple psychologists and doctors and different people in shorter snippets of time. It just didn't have the same effect that having this bigger, longer conversation that included all of the context of how I thought and how I felt in my experience, in my attitude and beliefs on my life and the world that I lived in. At the end of that first session, Kim let me know that she needed a bit more time to review things and to think about different possibilities for remedies and avenues for healing. And she scheduled me to come back the following week. And so the following week I went back and our discussion continued. She asked me a few more pointed questions about specific areas of my experience, and specifically with regards to traumatic life events. And at the end of that meeting, she decided on a remedy, which was a plant remedy, a plant known as Euphrasia officinalis, also known as eyebright. And so I left that subsequent meeting, again, feeling quite a bit lighter, but also with a tiny little vial of translucent white pellets. Over the course of the next few weeks and months, as the symptoms of allergy showed up, I took the remedy, and it was enough just to ease the symptoms so that I could function and get through the day and more or less move on with my life. But in the end, this kind of turned out to be a pivotal event in the total resolution of all of my allergy symptoms. Over the next, few months and in the next few allergy seasons, eventually all of my symptoms and all of my allergic reactions kind of went away. However, this was just the tip of the iceberg. The most important part of this exchange with this very intelligent, compassionate, and soft-spoken woman was actually in the knowledge and understanding that she imparted to me in the course of our discussions. In one of our discussions, Kim had described to me how the human system worked, and she kind of used a bunch of hand gestures and words to paint this image in my mind of how the human system, the human organism, could be thought of kind of like as a tripod on which a bunch of pendulums swing, and like that, so oscillations back and forth. And if you can think of your being in life, how you exist and how you act in life, as being centered on having a center of gravity and being positioned in a certain way, when you experience a traumatic life event that really kind of like strikes you to your core, your whole being and center of gravity gets shifted, can be shifted to the dark or fear side of the experience of life. And although you may not be fully aware of this transition, it happens in a way and it permeates all aspects of your being and how you think, how you feel, how you act. And it effectively kind of puts a lens on your whole experience of life that is darkened, dulled or darkened. And so this shift can happen and you may not even be aware of it. And so this exchange that I had with Kim, she communicated this idea that was my first exposure to this thing that I later found out is called the law of the pendulum, or also the Hermetic principle of rhythm, which states that everything is in a constant state of motion, moving back and forth like a pendulum. Everything has its tides in and out, up and down, back and forth. And this is a universal law that applies to all things in the universe, including all aspects of the human experience. This understanding that I got from this visit with a homeopath really, really changed my mind in fundamental ways. And it really caused me to start looking in different directions to answer not only my challenges with anxiety, but other problems that I was experiencing in my life. So what I gained from homeopathy was not just a remedy for my seasonal allergy problem, but access to a person who penetrated very deep inside my being by listening very intently to the overarching themes of my life and asking questions in the right area. She penetrated deep into aspects that I was not even aware of that existed within myself, and provided me the opportunity to rise up in my own understanding, shift my consciousness, and to start seeing myself and the world around me in a different way. While on the surface, the symptoms of my allergic reactions seemed to dissipate, as my eyes, my body began healing, on deeper levels, big changes were happening. Over the next few months and years, emotions started rising up out of me. Feelings of shame and guilt and fear and self-doubt began arising, and I began releasing them. And somehow this was all tied in to this manifestation of symptoms that looked like allergies. The allergies were actually a surface symptom of a much deeper emotional problem that went way back in my history, all the way back to when I was a child. And it was related to my very strong attachment to my mother, and manifest as allergies when I actually left home to go live on my own. One of the reasons why I'm sharing all this with you is because I find it really quite alarming just how many people, and especially young people, are resorting to medications and pharmaceutical solutions to the anxiety and depression problem without the full understanding of the implications that these substances can have actually on causing further imbalances in the human system. Again, in some cases, the use of medications can be warranted. In extreme cases where it's being used to bring a person down to a level where they can actually start pursuing avenues for proper healing. But in most cases, actually, there's a lot of damage that's being done, and it's not really truly addressing the root causes of all of the symptoms, and it's not addressing the true source of the energy that's producing the anxiety and the depression. From my own personal experience, the outward symptoms, the agitation, the frustration, the worry, the pulling back and forth, the confusion, and that feeling that there's this invisible barrier, those are all messages and indications of a deeper problem, which a lot of it has to do with holding on to old emotional patterns from your past. And, anxiety and depression really oftentimes is a message to you from the deeper parts of your being that you need to let go of those past patterns that are actually holding you back and that no longer really help you and are, they're not really resourceful patterns that you need to let go of so that you can go on with your life and change and grow and become a better version of yourself. Again, drugs and medications, for the most part, they're just quick fixes. They're BS, Band-Aid solutions, and they're kind of like a sweeping under the rug of the problem, just trying to push it out of the way. Whereas the real solution is the opposite. You want to pull out. You want to look at what the message is of anxiety and depression is trying to tell you. Your mind, body, and spirit is sending you a message that you need to make changes in your life. You need to change your trajectory to get onto the better path, the path that you're meant to be pursuing, to produce a life of greater purpose and meaning. And so, what I'm basically trying to share with you here is that there are other avenues. There are other avenues that can lead you down a path to true healing and really deal with those underlying causal agents that are creating the symptoms that you experience as anxiety and depression. Fundamentally, at the end of the day, both anxiety and depression are negatively charged energetic problems that arise from conditioned beliefs and subconscious fear. bring you down to a lower level within your being. So since we're talking about homeopathy, and homeopathy, a lot of the remedies are based on plants, I like to remind you of a few things. Plants existed on this earth long before any animals, including humans. And our entire lives are facilitated by these beings that transfer the energy of the sun through to us and allow our lives to be possible. Not only do they provide us with the energy from the sun through food, they also provide the oxygen that we breathe that allow us to exist. Furthermore, it stands to reason that the same creative force that maintains all life on Earth also had the foresight and the audacity to provide us with natural solutions to any problems we can encounter in life, including all those related to our mental and emotional health and well-being. Historically, the active components of most modern medicines originated in natural sources: fungi, bacteria, plants, and other animals. And for tens of thousands of years, indigenous peoples all over the world have used natural sources to solve all of the human ailments that are encountered in our lives. So I would like to suggest here that there's a good chance that the solution to your challenge in the form of anxiety or depression can likely be found in a natural source that's readily available. There's a solution in the form of a natural remedy that can help shift your energy into a higher and better state. So here are a few more things to consider about homeopathy. Homeopathy is a medical practice that was established in the late 1700s by a German healer named Samuel Hahnemann. And he was a very interesting person. He was like one of those people that from a very young age was identified as a bit of a genius, so to speak. And so from a very young age, he was studying languages and science and all different aspects of chemistry, biology, and he had this strong interest in medicine. So he went to school and started practicing. And pretty quickly, he became disillusioned with the common practices of the day. A lot of it, the common medical practice was bloodletting and purging and basically using leeches to clean people's blood or getting people to vomit or the contents of their stomach or to remove the contents of their bowels, with the idea of purging the bad thing out of the system. So he was very disillusioned and actually left the medical profession and went and started to study the pure sciences of chemistry and physics. And then he had his own children, and when they had ailments, he got back into medicine, and he was like, okay, I'm not going to do it the old way. There's got to be a better system, a better idea. And so Samuel Hahnemann, he was dissatisfied with the practices of the day, created this alternative healing modality, this form of medicine known as homeopathy, and introduced it to the Western world. Homeopathy is an alternative system of medicine that uses the idea of like cures like. And so the idea being that when you take the natural remedy, the natural homeopathic remedies, a plant or a mineral or whatever it happens to be, if you take that remedy and give it to a healthy person, that substance produces a certain set of symptoms in the body, in the healthy human body. And then when you take a person that's ill or at disease, in a state of disease, a lack of ease, those symptoms that they're presenting in both their mental, emotional, and physical aspects of their being, there's a certain energetic fingerprint. And when you match the remedy to that fingerprint, you can basically shock that person, and it pushes their system, their overall organism enough that they can swing back into the center, back into the natural place where they would normally sit as a healthy individual. And so it's a very interesting concept of using energy and resonance to shift from illness and disease back to harmony within the entire human system. Another interesting thing about homeopathy is that opposed to traditional Western medicine that views that when there's a disease or illness in the body, that there's something wrong with the body, homeopathy comes from the standpoint and the attitude that the human body and the human system is created in the eye of perfection. It's a perfect system, and that instead of there being something wrong with it, when we're experiencing the symptoms of disease, it's actually just indicating, it's a message that indicates that the body's out of balance. And the whole idea and concept is that periodically our bodies, from outside stimulus, our bodies get shifted out of its natural center of gravity and periodically needs to be recalibrated. And so in a lot of ways, homeopathy is a bit of a spiritual medical practice because it comes from a completely different standpoint and belief system, where it views humans as this creation that exists in the larger created universe. And it views the human body and the natural world as this perfect self-regulating system that periodically just needs to have minor adjustments. Another really interesting thing about homeopathy is that it acknowledges that no two humans are exactly alike. We're all kind of unique individuals. And because of this, every curative process, every therapeutic means actually is very individualized. It's very specific to each person. That means two people that are exhibiting the exact same symptoms of disease are more than likely going to receive very different treatments based on the collective, holistic representation of all of the symptoms on all of the levels, from the physical up through the emotional, the mental, and their spiritual or belief system. And that, I think, makes it, because it's so very individualized and specific to each individual person, it has the potential to be a lot more effective in producing a better outcome. So rather than just treating the surface symptoms, it actually goes into the underlying causes and can allow the individual to shift into a higher frequency within their being. So from my own personal experiences with homeopathy and the understanding that I gained, it really allowed me to put myself in a position to really start understanding and looking at myself and my experience of life in a different way. And that change in worldview, that shift in paradigm, is what actually fundamentally allowed me in the end to release all of the negative energies in my body from my past that were contributing and were the root cause of my anxiety and depression that I had experienced over a period of 15 years. In the weeks and the months and the years that followed my initial homeopathic treatment and my treatments that followed, an interesting thing that happened was all of these energies started moving up and out of my body. All of these old emotions started rising up. Things like shame and guilt and fear and doubt. All of these low-level vibrations started moving up through me, and I started having these continual emotional releases, like crying and just weird feelings that I learned through meditation just to sit with and allow them to move through my body. And as I did that, my attitude shifted. I became more optimistic and my life got better. My relationships improved and my overall health and well-being changed for the better. So my message to you, if you are experiencing the outward symptoms of anxiety and depression, the agitation, the confusion, that sense of emotional overwhelm, then I encourage you to look outside the box, to step outside of the box that society has created in your mind and start looking for other holistic approaches and energy healing modalities that can really help not only solve the surface symptoms, but actually help you dig deeper into the root causes of the actual anxiety and depression that you're experiencing in your day-to-day life. It's really easy for us to get stuck in these limited ideas because we're surrounded by this system, this medical system that says like there's only these options that you have available to you and this is what you need to do. It's really easy to get stuck and to not think outside of the box and to explore other possible areas and avenues that can really help you. Again, every person is unique and different, and what's going to help you find your solutions may be very different from what I experienced and what somebody else experiences, but still, if you are looking in multiple areas, you're more likely to encounter something that's actually really going to help shift you and get to the root of the issue. So in summary, my message to you is that solutions to your problem of anxiety or depression can potentially be found in alternative healing modalities such as homeopathy and other alternative methods that look at the human system as a whole and consider not just the physical body, but the body, heart, mind, and spirit, the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the belief structure that actually makes up holistically everything that you are in this human experience of life. Above and beyond the BS, the Band-Aid solutions that are offered by the traditional medical system, what I'm suggesting to you is that if you're a highly sensitive person, and chances are that you are, if you're experiencing anxiety and depression, there's a good chance that you're an HSP or a highly sensitive person. What I'm saying is that there are other alternatives that can help you on a path towards true healing and resolution of your symptoms. At the end of the day, what you're really looking for is to regain your center, regain true homeostasis and balance in all aspects of your being so that you can live a more meaningful, grounded, and productive life, full of joy, peace, calm, and happiness. Hey there, if any of the elements from my story or the ideas presented here resonate with you, feel free to stop by my website at www.changeyourmind.life. For a limited time, there's a free ebook available called The 12 Steps Towards Freedom from Anxiety and Depression. 70 pages for free. Click on the green button in the right-hand corner. Send me your name and email address, and it's yours to help get you started on a path towards freedom from anxiety and depression. Additionally, if you've tried everything and you're still struggling with anxiety or depression, feel free to check out the latest course through my community called 30 Days to Freedom. It's available for a limited time, 30% off, again through the website at www.changeyourmind.life. Anyways, that's it for today's episode. I really hope that this finds you in a good place and that it helps you, give you new ideas to find new solutions. And thank you for being here as always. Your presence is truly a gift, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. See you later.